Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Okay, before I introduce today's speaker, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves to each other. I'm Martin Snow.
Douglas Hall.
I'm Chris.
Dean Bellamy.
George Hubbard. CJ.
Patrick.
3.
John.
Francisco.
Anthony.
Todd Pope.
Ramey.
Ralph.
Mark Olson.
Richard.
Will. Harley. Jay.
Peter Dell.
Dan.
Leor. Kenny Matsuda. Steve.
Michael. David Margolis.
Casper.
Steve Carson.
David.
Peter. John. Craig Wenzel.
Lon.
Chris. Dave.
Jason.
Jim. Richard Azzolini.
Patrick.
Roy.
Jack.
Michael.
Mark.
Great. Anyone here for the first or second time or returned after a long absence? Could you introduce yourself again?
I'm Chris Shelton, and I came here years ago before the renovation, and it was great. And now I've been coming back.
Welcome back, Chris. And back there?
My name is Dan, and this is my first time here.
Great. Welcome. And
I'm Kissinger, visiting from Seattle.
great. The old timers will make this welcome at the social hour after our speaker. Our speaker this morning is Tom Moon. Tom has been here before. Many of us know him well, and think of today as a special day with him as a speaker. Tom is a psychotherapist in San Francisco. He works primarily with gay men and specializes in the use of mindfulness as a tool for self-exploration. His spiritual home is at Spirit Rock Meditation Center, where he is a student in the Dedicated Practitioners program. Today, Tom, you will be speaking on reincarnation.
That's right.
Tom.
Hi. Well, I've been really looking forward to coming here to talk about the whole subject of reincarnation because it's a subject that we typically don't discuss. I have a whole lot of stuff to go through. I don't think I'll get through it all, but if we could save questions and discussion to the end, maybe that'll help a little bit. Forgive me if I speak fast. What I think is that there seem to be two kinds of schools of thought or poles in Western Buddhism when it comes to the whole subject of reincarnation and Buddhist cosmology in general. On this end are what we could call the skeptics, for whom Buddhism is not a religion but a philosophy, a way of life, a path of liberation, even a psychology, a treatment for suffering. And probably one of the best, most articulate spokesmen for that point of view is Stephen Batchelor, who wrote an excellent book called Buddhism Without Beliefs. He argues this way. He says, look, why don't we all just start by accepting what we all know to be true anyway, which is that we don't know what, if anything, happens after we die. And any view, including the view that there is no afterlife, is a view. It all belongs to the realm of speculation, the thicket of views. It's true that Buddhism comes to us wrapped in a very typically extravagant Indian cosmology. But every innovation of the Buddha was about how to live this life and this moment, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path. And those elements of Buddhism are experiential. They're about right now. They're even scientifically studyable, as we've learned with the work of John Kabat-Zinn and others. And so for us, Buddhism can be Dharma practice. Period. End of story. It's more about what we do than about what we believe. And as such, it will never contradict science. We may not get answers to deep questions that are maybe unanswerable, but it won't contradict science. Actually, it could contradict science. If science ever discovers that clinging doesn't lead to suffering after all, we're screwed. Right? Otherwise, we're fine. So that's that. On the other end of the spectrum would be someone like Robert Thurman, author of Infinite Life. So he argues very differently. He says, look, you can't separate Buddhist cosmology from Buddhist practice so neatly without doing damage to Buddhist practice. I'll give 3 examples of what he means. They're a unified whole, he says. Let's look at just the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering, which is the heart, the point of Buddhist practice to begin with. If there is no life after death, the cessation of suffering is absolutely guaranteed for all of us in the very foreseeable future. We're going to die. It's going to happen. So we can relax. If you're in a hurry, you can commit suicide. There's no penalty for early withdrawal at all. If you're not, we can ameliorate our suffering here and now through sex, drugs, alcohol, American Idol. Go Sanjay. So, his point is, all serious aside, his point is that for thousands of years, what has motivated generations of practitioners to give their lives one-pointedly to Dharma practice has been the conviction that we face going forward an infinite series of future lives, each of them characterized by dukkha, pervasive unsatisfactoriness. We're in a fix. He says the idea that there's no life after death does not increase your existential anxiety, it decreases it. If you take this idea seriously, you can see what he means. So the seriousness of practice is based on the idea that we are infinite beings. And a couple of other examples. The law of karma, he argues, a basic foundation of Buddhist ethics, makes no sense without reincarnation. Third, the Bodhisattva vow, this beautiful ideal of transcendental compassion. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Well, you're not going to do that in one lifetime. And if you don't believe in reincarnation, he argues, then the Bodhisattva vow is mere sentimentality. It's poetry, perhaps, but it's not serious. So that's how he argues. Finally, he also argues that our nature as infinite and immortal beings is not unknowable. That every enlightened being has, including the Buddha, has said that is what is true, and they've promised us that we can realize this for ourselves. I'll get to that a little later when I talk about the Buddha. So anyway, those are the 2 kind of poles of Buddhist practice. They had a debate in this issue of Tricycle magazine, which I recommend. They're both very opinionated and lively debaters, and it's really worth reading. I also brought up a bibliography, printed up a bibliography of all these books that I've been referred to. So if anyone wants to study this further, you can use that. I would really be curious. Stop here for a second and take a poll. I'd like to know kind of where GBFers stand on these. If you don't mind, just raise your hand. I'd like to ask, how many people in this room do not believe in reincarnation? You're not agnostics about it. You think it does not happen. Okay. How many people would describe yourselves as agnostics on the question? Either it's unknowable or you just don't know. Okay. How many people would definitely describe yourselves as believers in reincarnation? Yeah. Okay, that's kind of where I thought people would be. Okay. Yeah, so American Buddhists tend to be more on the skeptical side. In fact, I think that's what attracted me personally to it, was that I don't have to believe anything. I don't have to go with a catechism. I'd like to talk now a little bit about what the Buddha taught about reincarnation. He did have definite views, as far as we know, on the whole issue. It starts with the night of his enlightenment. On the night of his enlightenment, there were 3 watches of the night. During the first watch, his divine eye opened up, as they say in the suttas. Divine eye refers to the belief, the very traditional belief in India, that meditation is not just a tool for achieving inner peace or compassion. It's a tool of exploring the nature of reality. And that if you become sufficiently focused and concentrated, the divine eye opens. That is, you can acquire paranormal insight into the nature of existence. This is simply assumed throughout Indian history. So that happened to him during the first watch of the night. And what started to happen was his past lives began to unfold. 1 life, 2 life, 3 lives. It goes on 100,000 lives. Eons of world contraction, world expansion. Back to beginningless time. He saw that he'd been going through all of these different lifetimes in every realm of existence. In the second watch of the night, he saw that he wasn't unique, because then he began to see all other beings, or innumerable other beings rather, going through lifetime after lifetime after lifetime according to their karma. And this is where his understanding of how karma works came to him. In the third watch of the night, and I think this is what made him the Buddha, he turned his attention back on himself and inquired, who is the knower of all this? Who is the seer of all this? And realized the ultimate truth of emptiness. And the strange paradox, unique I think to Buddhism, which is reincarnation there is, but no one who reincarnates. Oh, is that going to explain that? Right. Later, as he began to teach, he taught his followers, the monks and nuns, how to remember their own past lives. This was actually something that he thought was teachable, just as he had done it. I'll read just a brief passage from one of the suttas, from the middle-length discourses, the Kandaraka Sutta. He says, with his mind, when his concentrated mind is purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to knowledge of the recollection of past lives. He recollects his manifold past lives. That is 1 birth, 2 birth, 3 births, it goes on and on. 5 birth, 20, 100,000, many eons of work, it goes on and on and on. There I was so named, of such a clan, with such an appearance, such was my nutriment, such my experience of pleasure and pain, such my life term, and passing away from there I reappeared elsewhere. And there too I was so named, of such a clan, blah, blah, blah. It goes on like that. So the point of this is that for these people, these early Buddhists, the idea of reincarnation was not considered an unverifiable idea. You could verify it through your own experience, because you could remember your past lives if your mind is sufficiently one-pointed. The more spiritually advanced you are, the farther back you can go. A Buddha can go back infinitely. A beginner can go back 1 or 2 lifetimes, and then everything in between. What interested me about this study of discovering this for myself was that, in a certain sense, this history is repeated in the 20th century when, in my profession, when a lot of therapists, psychotherapists who use hypnosis began to discover that when they hypnotized clients and asked them to return to the origin of their symptoms, sometimes they would start talking about past lives, even if they didn't believe in them, and consciously believe in reincarnation. And a lot of people began to discover this independently. There was a famous book called The Search for Bridie Murphy about this in the 50s. So this has now become a kind of a subspecialty in my profession. You can, right now, for a small fee, you can go to a lot of therapists in this town and get regress to your past lives. I would say the majority in my profession consider this sketchy at best, some outright quackery, some will say. But many people, there are a number, I would say a minority, of fairly prominent therapists who have become committed to the idea that this is real. A few of them, Brian Weiss was a Yale-trained psychiatrist. He wrote this book called Many Lives, Many Masters, based on one of his own cases. A woman who, I won't go into all this too much. He became a believer, and he began as a skeptic. Jungian analysts like Roger Wolger, who treats the whole subject from a Jungian point of view. Helen Wambach. It goes on. There's just hundreds of books like this out. So it's quite a little industry here. And so is any of this evidence that reincarnation is real? I'd like to summarize briefly the arguments that people use in favor of that proposition and the arguments against. The pro people say, look, the lifetimes that people remember are clearly not wish-fulfilling fantasies. People don't remember that they're Napoleon or the high priestess of Atlantis. They typically remember lives in which they were dirt poor. The lives are often grim, mundane, tragic. Why would people want to make up this stuff? So it's not wish fulfillment. Second, when people connect with traumas from these so-called past lives, their symptoms clear up when they have a cathartic reliving, reworking of these memories in exactly the same way that if you regress someone or go through childhood traumas from this lifetime, it'll work out. So it's therapeutic. It seems to have, substance to it. So wouldn't this be evidence that there's something real about what they're remembering? The skeptics say, well, yes. Okay, first of all, there's been no systematic study of the efficacy of this therapy. But assuming that all these anecdotes are true, look, people can be regressed in hypnosis and remember their alien abductions too, or the fact that everyone in their family but them was a member of a satanic cult. Memory in hypnosis is very tricky. It can get very powerful and focused, but you're also more suggestible under hypnosis, and it's been shown experimentally that you can implant false memories. So, and people get relief from their symptoms by remembering these other things that most of us wouldn't believe. So, it's generally accepted now in the court systems that evidence from hypnotic regression is not admissible unless you get corroborating evidence from another source. Right? And so is there any corroborating evidence? The problem is with most of these memories that they're so vague and generic. I was a French peasant. You can't ever identify whether the person you remember being actually even existed. In the famous case of Bridie Murphy, which I think some of you are old enough to remember, it was a big sensational book in the 50s of a woman who was a Chicago housewife who was regressed and remembered being Bridie Murphy, an Irish woman in county court. Well, nobody ever was able to verify that anyone named this Bridie Murphy had ever even existed. So how can you say you have proof that you're the reincarnation of someone you don't even know ever existed? So the question is, the question they raise is, what about corroboration? Do people have memories of former lives that you can verify that the person actually existed and you didn't know about them or couldn't have known about them before? Well, there are a lot of cases in which that is claimed. And the foremost researcher that I think really is the most interesting, and if anyone has respectability, it's this guy. His name is Ian Stevenson. Really fascinating guy. A psychiatrist at the University of Virginia who, thanks to a really generous grant from the inventor of Xerox, was able to spend a 40-year career investigating the so-called veridical memories of little children who remembered former lifetimes. His research team, and he collected over 3,000 cases of this claimed phenomenon. What was I going to say about it? If anyone, well, here's his first book, 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. It is probably the most boring book I have ever read. It reads like a legal brief, it's got tables of who said what, who verifies what, who corroborates what, who contradicts who. And it's fascinating because the cases are so interesting. I mean, he reports cases in which little children begin to speak foreign languages that they've never learned. They talk about living a life some 100 miles away that nobody in their family knows about. They go there to that village or that. In most of these cases, the original cases were in India or Sri Lanka, and they would recognize their former spouses and children, name them by names. Sometimes they'd be able to fix complicated equipment that all of this really astounding stuff is claimed. And he argues that, hey, this is suggestive of reincarnation. His books aren't really, there's a website you can, if you want to look at his stuff. Editor from the Washington Post went with him on his last research trip, and this gives a good feel, this Old Souls gives a good feel of what he was looking at, how he worked. If anyone has scientific respectability in this field, it is Ian Stevenson. He died just in February. Even Carl Sagan, of this man's, Carl Sagan made it clear he thought reincarnation is bunk. But he said scientifically the evidence here is interesting. It's well documented enough that it merits further study. My own reading of the evidence, for what it's worth, is it is suggestive. It is interesting. I don't think that it will convince anybody who is strong enough to convince anybody who isn't a believer already or wants to be. But it is interesting. It is very much worth reading. For anyone who wants to study, I think this issue of is there any kind of scientific evidence for this, Ian Stevenson is the man to investigate. I wasn't sure I was going to do this, but I think I will since I'm among friends. I wanted to talk. I've been studying this stuff for about a year, and I think that I would like to talk about my own personal experiences that led me to do this, if that's all right. And then we can have a discussion. On a meditation retreat a couple of years ago, I was having a great retreat, blissed out, quiet, peaceful. But on the last day, suddenly I was flooded with anxiety. I couldn't sleep, didn't know what I was anxious about. And I couldn't figure it out. And I went home and was horrified to discover this anxiety continued in my regular waking life after that. So I didn't know what I was anxious about. I could come up with stuff, money, aging, the usual things to be anxious about, but none of them really captured it. I remember talking to Jim Fishman about it one day. We had a little talk about it. I was trying to figure out what the hell was going on. My spiritual advisor at Spirit Rock, Howie Cohn, said, look, meditation practice, especially intensive practice, is a purification practice. Something is coming up that isn't finished. You need to go back and finish it. But it took me months because of my life, to get back to Spirit Rock and sit quietly and to begin focusing on what this was. The minute I got there, it was again, really intense, hard to meditate, hard to focus. Walking meditation was a little easier. On the third day, it was so unbearable, I couldn't sit in the hall anymore. I started doing walking meditation, but more like a run. I was charging up the hill behind the meditation hall. And what is going on? And then this is what happened. As I was walking up the hill, I looked up and caught for a thousandth of a second, I saw a soldier with a gun. And then it was gone. It was like a little hallucination. What was that? Then I saw myself in snow, and basically a flood of memories began to come back of a former life in which I was a Polish Jew shot by the Nazis at the age of 24. In a pit. I remember my father, my grandfather, an uncle, me, and it came back as if this was memory, not fantasy, and very strange, And I sat down, and intense emotion began to well up. I felt horrified for a long time, and then deep grief began to come up, just sadness for myself and for all those millions of victims of that horror. Just the overwhelming suffering, I started crying. And then it was as if a little voice inside of me said, Tom, it's over. The Holocaust is over. All those hapless souls who died have moved on. And mercifully, none of them remember, most of them don't remember what happened. So that even suffering of that magnitude comes to an end. In fact, this voice inside of me, I didn't hear it, but it said to me, even suffering of that magnitude is a drop of water in the ocean of consciousness, the ocean of blissful consciousness, which you fundamentally are. And then, I just sort of dissolved, lost body consciousness and just dissolved into this deeply blissful state. For a long time, the anxiety left, never returned. And after a while, I sort of came back to myself, and I got up and walked down to the meditation hall thinking, well, damn! I got my money's worth this time. At the time I had this experience, of course, when something like that's going on, you just go with it, But critical faculties returned later, and I began to ask myself, so what does this all mean? Do I believe today that I am the reincarnation of this Polish Jew who died? Do I believe that? I would say no. I would say I don't know for sure. Maybe, maybe not. The psychologist in me knows how tricky memory is. Other explanations are possible. I would say that this man that I was is part of my history now, that he is connected with me in the same way that my childhood memories are. That is subjective. What it means, I don't know. And I think that, as a Westerner who's got a mystic in me, obviously, and a scientist in me, those war within me, and I think it'll never be resolved. But I could think, I can live in this don't know. I like that side of the Stephen Batchelor argument, that we can live in don't know. But the second part of the experience, that I find I've had this kind of experience since I was 19. That I cannot doubt. I can pretend to, but I can't authentically doubt that fundamentally there is a transcendental aspect to our experience. We really are part of some vast, vast life We're connected with each other in ways we can never understand, and we're part of something inexpressible, fundamentally joyful, infinite, all of that. Inconceivable to the mind, but deeply familiar to the heart. Impersonal only in the sense that it's closer than personal can ever be. I don't know what I'm talking about exactly. I think it was Arthur Koestler who said, we are all condemned to be peeping holes at the keyhole of eternity. I love that, It may be that enlightened beings don't have to peek through the keyhole, but people like me, beginners on the path, certainly do. But I do believe that when we look, sometimes we see. And that, so I don't know about reincarnation, but this other, that we are part of this other, this larger life, feeds my daily practice, enters my daily life. And for that I am deeply, deeply grateful. Before I stop, and we can have a little discussion, I want to read a poem, a Tibetan poem, addressed to Prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom, whom the poet addresses as the noble lady. O noble lady, no matter how I sought you, I found no truth-substantiated certainty. My mind youth tortured by fabrications, till you bestowed upon him deep relief in the forest hut of inexpressibility. Transcendent wisdom, supreme mother of Buddhas, breathing out and in all that lives and stands, natural clear light, forever trouble-free, truth body angel, let us all enjoy the great good fortune of the noble lady. So, thank you very much for indulging me in this. And, I'll stop there, and maybe we can have questions and discussion.
Sure. Are there questions?
I was interested in the writer that believes in this Indian cosmology. Does he talk about how the you is defined? The reason being is I studied a little bit for like a year on Buddhist metaphysics, and what I read, they talked about how the you is not one thing, but it's actually a component of several different kinds of things. And
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is like, thank you. This is the most difficult question of all. I mean, the whole idea of self, the whole anatta doctrine in Buddhism, and I referred to it, the strange paradox that if there is no self, well then what's passing from life to life? I mean, isn't there a contradiction there? I don't really know how to answer that. Actually, and there's a whole lot of different views within Buddhism. Not all Buddhists believe there is no self, and the term anatta, the Pali term, is often translated as not self. This mind is not self. These thoughts are not self. This body is not self. This experience is not self. It's the neti tradition in Buddhism. Not this, not this. You eliminate so that, and the Buddha talked about. He talked in that way, saying what it wasn't. But there are people who say, well, when asked directly, is there a self, he refused to answer the question. So people have filled in the blanks. You know, there's a tradition in Mahayana Buddhism called the Tathagata Grabha, which is supposed to be something that transmigrates from life to life. In Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about the clear light that we are. You know, so fundamentally, it's a mystical understanding, and that is not an understanding. Yes?
But it's not a conscious self. Like in the West, we define self-identity as this our consciousness, or our sense of personality. And it seems like from the very little I've read, the different schools about how to define self, they're not talking about that. They're either talking about some kind of core instinctual essence of self, which is beyond our personality, or some kind of assemblage.
Well, people deal with it differently. That's one idea. Some people do see it as a consciousness, the clear. I think Tibetans often tend to the clear light of consciousness. Some people see it as a karmic bundle of tendencies. I think who was it? I don't know who was it who said that what reincarnates is our bad habits. Fundamentally, there is a thicket of views. I don't know how to answer. Robert Thurman, this book is worth reading because he both believes in no self and in reincarnation. He explains in the first chapter how he does it. He is a beautiful writer, very smart. I just can't reproduce his idea today. But I think your question is one: what our true nature is something we grapple with. Personally, I think the Buddha was pointing to some kind of true nature that he talked about the unborn, the unconditioned, the uncreated, the deathless. People argue about what that means or whether it refers to anything at all. You see, he spoke only in negative terms. He would never describe what he was referring to. Partly because he was reacting to the Hindu habit of just going on forever about the infinite this and Brahman, the Brahma worlds and light, and they love it. They go on forever. He wouldn't do that and he said, it's a distraction from the daily work of mindfulness and of Dharma practice, which leads to liberation. It's a distraction. So there's a lot. It's very unclear, at least from the Theravadan scriptures, what he actually felt. So there are really many, many, many different views of what he felt on the nature of the self. It really isn't quite as clear as many people think. Understand?
Other questions?
It's something that interests me on this topic is its relation to other religions, and like the Hindu religion, and that he was coming out of that culture, and the whole thing, the negative side of it is if you're not rich and comfortable like I am, it's your fault because you were naughty in a previous life.
Yeah.
And then the Christian view, which I've heard described as human exceptionalism. And one thing that attracts me to Buddhism as compared to Christianity is this idea, that humans are living things, but they're just, they're a whole other class than any other living thing. And it seems to me in Buddhism you get, yes, we're living things, but other living things have all these rights too. And not getting into the Christian thing of, well, if another 1,000 people, can live off of this water, who cares if we exterminate this species of fish?
Yes.
And I don't exactly know what the question is, but anyway, that's why, to me, it seems unlikely, that there is reincarnation just for humans.
Yeah.
But I guess in Buddhism, everything is reincarnated.
In Buddhism,
butterflies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All beings are
But people
transmigrate.
never become butterflies.
Or snakes. They're quite. The stories are. You can't. Oh yeah. And not only that, but this is an extravagant cosmology. We don't really look at it too much because in this culture, because but there are like hell realms and heaven realms and God realms and hungry ghost realms. You can reincarnate all through those realms, and then the animal realms and the plant realm. And all beings are infinite and just cycling around and through. So I don't think the charge of human exceptionalism actually applies to Buddhism because all beings are equal. We in the dedication of merit here we talk about believing in the equality of all that lives. I think that they really do believe in that on the basis of reincarnation, that we're all infinite beings, all equally deserving of happiness, all destined hopefully for final liberation. So I don't think it has quite the same flavor as what I was taught as a Christian kid. personally, I don't think it does.
Do you happen to know this novel called The Death of Vishnu?
No.
It came out a few years ago. You might enjoy it. It's written by an Indian mathematician, actually, and but it's a novel. And the premise of it is reincarnation. And there's a character who's a drunk who's dying on the steps of a house, and he's trying to make it up the steps. And as you move through the novel, you progress through these different sort of narrative lines. And it's pretty ingeniously done and very appealing. And when you were asking your question at the beginning about skepticism, I had to raise my hand more than once. And that's because I think that while I couldn't scientifically believe, I certainly could artistically believe. And, I've had lovers who were butterflies and snakes in the past, that there's certainly a conception or I've been a butterfly and a snake, or am, and that there's definitely something there that's enormously appealing to me in the idea, as what the poet Wallace Stevens might have called a supreme fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that very much, and I appreciate your kind of laying out the tension and grappling with something that we generally don't want to touch.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, there is a poetry to it all. Mm-hmm. The other thing, another response to the human exceptionalism idea, in Tibetan Buddhism, the idea, since we've all had an infinite number of lifetimes, all of us have been in every conceivable relationship with every other being in the universe. Everyone has been dear to us. And the idea is that you must remember this, and that it is an incentive to develop compassion. So the idea, if you really believe it, I think it begins to encourage a sense of friendliness toward all that lives. Mm-hmm. At least that's the idea. That's what Thurman says about the Bodhisattva vow. Yes, sir.
I was thinking, I heard, I don't know if this is literally true or not, but that every 6 breaths we somehow breathe in all the molecules of everyone who's ever lived. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think in Christianity there's this concept of the mystical body, which could sort of take you to and it seems like about reincarnation, there's something there. I mean, for me, and yet as soon as one tries to reify it, it's just another way to kind of say, well, I've got all the answers.
It becomes a view to cling to. Yeah, exactly.
And I read recently, Stephen Levine was talking about it, and he said a lot of people, and this is of course kind of a little bit nasty maybe, but that know a lot about their past lives don't know much about this one, So.
Exactly. Yeah, I've met some of those. Yeah. One of my clients remembered that in the past life he was the whore of Babylon.
That's pretty good.
I think he was just bragging.
How do you describe karma if you don't believe in reincarnation? I guess I don't have trouble with it. I don't believe in reincarnation. I don't have trouble with karma just in this lifetime and our actions and the way we affect people and they live on even after our death. But I'm just wondering how you define.
Well, actually, I would have trouble defining it. They do to me. I kind of agree with Thurman on this point that karma and reincarnation seem to go together. How would you? Can I ask you how you would?
I guess for me, personally, I'm not a scholar in this, but just in my daily life, just think that kind of what goes around comes around, and that the energies that I put out come back to me, and that also I have an effect on people around me, and even after I'm gone, the people that I've touched in one way or another. I guess that's just a very layman's understanding of karma.
Well, Thurman would answer to that. Terrible injustice does happen to people children, that they, what's coming back around to? I mean, how would you account for that? There is manifest injustice in this world. It doesn't seem to make any sense.
Right, but can you believe in karma and believe that not everything is determined?
Yeah, you can.
That's what that's mine too.
Well, that's a very Californian definition of karma. No, it just is. Karma in these more traditional, like if you're going for authentic, more of a traditional form of Buddhism, that's not karma. It's not how karma is defined.
Well, my understanding is that karma is not the law of reward and punishment. It's the law of cause and effect. It's very impersonal. So the idea of good karma and bad karma is not, it's quite impersonal. The other thing is, since we have an infinite number of lifetimes, the idea of soulmates, this kind of California idea, everybody's your soulmate, So a lot of the romantic notions of reincarnation were not part of original Buddhism. Also, the idea that reincarnation leads to progress, it's about evolution, it was not in original Buddhism at all. That notion was introduced by the Theosophists in the United States and Britain. They tried to wed a misunderstanding of Darwin's theory of evolution with karma. So every lifetime we're getting exactly the lessons we need to progress toward ultimate union with God or enlightenment. So the universe is kind of rooting for you. It's planning everything out so that you'll get just what you need. The Buddha did not say that at all. In fact, he said the opposite, as I understand it. The process of reincarnation is completely meaningless. It's as evolution actually is. It's going in every different direction at once. You're going around in circles according to this impersonal law of karma. And it doesn't mean anything. It's just an incredible display. It acquires meaning if you set the goal to end suffering, to end clinging. Then you use the law of karma to your benefit. And the stories of the Buddha's past lives are supposed to be morality tales in which you show how to do that, how to live how to respond to every action in a way that leads to less suffering, less harm to yourself and others, so that ultimately you reach that goal. But the universe the universe is just there in Buddha. It's not set up to lead anywhere. That's another way it differs from Christianity. It's not purposeful. In that way, it's kind of like the picture of the scientific view. Patrick?
Let's see, two things. I too like how you separated. You can believe, you can practice Buddhism without having to, buy the whole package. And I think for me, it's been possible to draw from the cosmology without believing in it. So I heard this lovely talk by a monk who spoke about, sort of as you said, how every being is our mother and every being is our child, or was at some point.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think of it like when people cut me off in traffic. Really can think, okay, that was my mother who did that. I don't hate them. I have compassion for them. And so, and I don't believe in reincarnation, and I frankly don't believe in karma.
Yeah.
But I can draw from it nonetheless and apply it, and so it's been really useful.
Great.
And for me, the karma thing just feels a bit like the sort of Christian view of do good and you'll get into heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this sort of imposition of justice. Like I'm actually much more comfortable trying to accept that there is no justice whatsoever, and I don't deserve fairness. And fairness too it feels like, well, I don't know, sort of American capitalism and this whole leftist diatribe about it.
Yeah.
It's much easier for me to just try to come to terms with the randomness of life and existence.
Yeah.
And I feel all the more compelled to try to be kind.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the face of that random violence.
Yeah, great. That's well said. Another way of looking at the Buddhist cosmology is as a kind of metaphor. that we are incarnating in this life every second. I reincarnate as my various identities and so on, and all the realms of existence that are posited. The hungry ghost realm. I love that realm. Beings with tiny little mouths and great big bellies who can never be fed. Go down to the financial district or the Castro on Saturday night. You see we have the hungry ghost in us. We have all these different realms in us. The turtle, the animal realms, the turtle hiding, in its shell, the snake, the butterfly, all those. We have all of these in us, and that's another way of relating to this, as a kind of poetry and as a kind of metaphor. I like that too. I find that very quite beautiful, spiritual.
Unfortunately, I think we're out of time.
Great. I'll leave all this stuff out, and I'd like to continue the discussion if anyone is interested out there.
But it is time for announcements.
Actually, next week we're continuing our mini-series on reincarnation with the fabulous and feisty Robina Corton, a 4-foot-tall Australian Tibetan Buddhist nun with a wonderful machine gun mouth and a brilliant mind. She's been here before and she's a crowd favourite, so I'd recommend you come and hear that. And she will be continuing from a different perspective on reincarnation.
She's going to talk on reincarnation?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great.
Anybody else?
Yes, we have an upcoming potluck. We have an upcoming potluck dinner. I don't have the flyers this week due to my being busy on something else, but I will have them next week and the week of it. It's on April 15th, which is 2 weeks from now. Ron Al Buchter, if I don't pronounce it right. Ron is giving it, he's at 400 Corbett at Clayton. You can take the 33 or the 37, or if you're really up to it, walk up the damn hill. It'll be April 15th, which I believe is Sunday. And I will have flyers next week with a little mini map and just the basic info. So if you want to plan to come to the potluck, bring something neat. You can either still remember how to cook some small little thing. I'll probably bring my pasta dish, or just pick something up and let's flood his house with with potluckers.
There are some sheets out there on the main table if anyone's interested in signing up for any of the activities of the Sangha. This might be one of the last weeks. I think Ray's not here. And there's a questionnaire over by the Dana Bowl that has been going around for the last couple of weeks. It asks for your views on the social life of the Sangha and the spiritual life and the outreach work that we do. So this will be the last week, and after that I will collate that and put some themes together and make it available for public distribution, as well as going back to the people who are in charge of the various committees and functions so that your input is fully heard.
And we have some words from our host today.
Yes, there's tea and snacks, and there's also a Dana Bowl. And in the spirit of generosity, if you could contribute what you can, the space here is not donated, so GVF does have an expense. And the third item is, if you do take some tea or drink some tea, could you please rinse out your cup?
Anything else? Then if we could gather in a circle for our dedication.
May whatever merit we have accrued in our practice today be for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be free from the divisions of war, hatred, and homophobia, sexism, all other forms of division. May all beings find happiness and peace.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month, and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live. Please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.